the Earth is flat.
When you look up at the sun and moon, you see two equally sized, equidistant circles tracing similar paths at similar speeds around a flat, stationary Earth. The experts at NASA, however, claim your common sense, everyday experience is false on all counts. To begin with, they say the Earth is not flat, but a big ball. Not stationary, but spinning around 19 miles per second. They say the sun does not revolve around the Earth as it appears, but Earth revolves around the sun. The moon, on the other hand, does revolve around the Earth, though not east to west as it appears, rather west to east. And the sun is actually 400 times larger than the moon and 400 times farther away. That's right. You can clearly see they're the same size and distance. You can see the Earth is flat. You can feel the Earth is stationary. But according to the gospel of modern astronomy, you are wrong and a simpleton worthy of endless ridicule if you dare to believe your own eyes and experience. With haughty arrogance, the nearest hypnotized heliocentrist will then inform you that the sun is 865,374 miles in diameter and 92,955,807 miles from the Earth. The moon is 2,159 miles in diameter and 238,900 miles from the Earth. And those just happen to be the exact diameters and distances necessary for a viewer from Earth to falsely perceive them as being the same size. So you see, silly flat earther, it is all an illusion, and the apparent equanimity of our day and night luminaries in the sky results from mere coincidental parallax perspective. The sun does not revolve around the Earth as it appears. Rather, the Earth spins 1,038 miles per hour under your feet and revolves 67,108 miles per hour around the sun. The moon does indeed revolve around the Earth, but not as it appears. Though it seems to move east to west just like the sun and everything else in the heavens, the moon actually spins west to east at 10.3 miles per hour, while orbiting Earth at 2,288 miles per hour, which, combined with Earth's 1,038 mile per hour spin and 67,108 mile per hour orbit around the sun, coincidentally results in all motions perfectly canceling out, making the moon seem to move across the heavens with similar path and similar speed as the sun, while always only showing us one side of its surface and perpetually hiding its dark side. Bernard Brewer said, "The moon presented a special math problem for the construction of the heliocentric model. The only way to make the moon fit in with the other assumptions was to reverse its direction from that of what everyone who has ever lived has seen it go. The math model couldn't just stop the moon like it did the sun, that wouldn't work. And it couldn't let it continue to go east to west as we see it go either, at the same speed or at a different speed. The only option was to reverse its observed east to west direction and change its speed from about 64,000 miles an hour to about 2,200 miles an hour. This reversal, along with the change in speed, were unavoidable assumptions that needed to be adopted if the model was to have any chance of mimicking reality." And Marshall Hall said, "They want you to believe that the moon's rotation is perfectly synchronized with its orbit, so that's why we only ever see one side of the moon, rather than conclude the obvious, that the moon is simply not rotating. Moreover, they had to slow down the moon's speed by 58,870 miles per hour and reverse its direction to west to east to successfully sell their phony heliocentricity system to a gullible public. I don't think there is one person in many, many thousands, regardless of education, who knows that the Copernican model had to turn the moon's observable direction around and give it a new speed to accommodate the phases and eclipses." William Carpenter said, "Astronomers tell us that the moon goes round the Earth in about 28 days. Well, we may see her making her journey around every day if we make use of our eyes, and these are about the best things we have to use. The moon falls behind in her daily motion as compared with that of the sun to the extent of 1 revolution in the time specified. But that is not making a revolution. Failing to go as fast as other bodies go in one direction does not constitute a going round in the opposite one, as the astronomers would have us believe. And since all this absurdity has been rendered necessary for no other purpose than to help other absurdities along, it is clear that the astronomers are on the wrong track. There are several theories about the relative size and distance of the sun and moon, all with their points of evidence and points of contention. Flat earthers throughout the ages have used sextants and plane trigonometry attempting to make such calculations, usually concluding the sun and moon both to be only about 32 miles in diameter and less than a few thousand miles from Earth. Perhaps the least plausible model, certainly the most exaggerated and imaginative, is the reigning heliocentric theory, claiming the sun to be a whopping 865,374 miles in diameter, 92,955,807 miles from the Earth, and the Moon 2,159 miles in diameter, 238,900 miles from the Earth. Heliocentrists' astronomical figures always sound perfectly precise, but they have historically been notorious for regularly and drastically changing them to suit their various models. For instance, in his time, Copernicus calculated the sun's distance from Earth to be 3,391,200 miles. The next century, Johannes Kepler decided it was actually 12,376,800 miles away. Isaac Newton once said, "It matters not whether we reckon it 28 or 54 million miles distant, for either would do just as well." How scientific! Benjamin Martin calculated between 81 and 82 million miles. Thomas Dilworth claimed 93,726,900 miles. John Hine stated positively 95,298,260 miles. Benjamin Gould said more than 96 million miles, and Christian Mayer thought it was more than 104 million. Thomas Winship says, "As the sun, according to science, may be anything from 3 to 104 million miles away, there is plenty of space to choose from. It is like the showman and the child. You pay your money for various astronomical works, and you take your choice as to what distance you wish the sun to be. If you are a modest person, go in for a few millions, but if you wish to be very scientific and to be mathematically certain of your figures, then I advise you to make your choice somewhere about 100 millions. You will at least have plenty of space to retreat into should the next calculation be against the figures of your choice. You can always add a few millions to keep up with the times, or take off as many as may be required to adjust the distance to the very latest accurate column of figures. Talk about ridicule. The whole of modern astronomy is like a farcical comedy, full of surprises. One never knows what monstrous or ludicrous absurdity may come forth next. You must not apply the ordinary rules of common sense to astronomical guesswork. No, the thing would fall to pieces if you did. Regiments of figures are paraded with all the learned jargon for which science is famous, but one might as well look at the changing clouds in the sky and seek for certainty there as to expect to get it from the propounders of modern astronomy. But there is no means of testing these ever-changing, never-stable speculations and bringing them to the scrutiny of hard logic and fact. Indeed there is. The distance of the sun can be measured with much precision, the same way as a tree or a house or a church steeple is measured, by plain triangulation. It is the principle on which a house is built, a table made, or a man of war constructed. The sun is always somewhere between the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn, a distance admitted to be less than 3,000 miles. How, then, can the sun, if it be so many thousands miles in diameter, squeeze itself into a space of about 3,000 miles only? "But look at the distance," say the professors. We have already done that, and not one of the wise men we have so often challenged has ever attempted to refute the principle on which we measure the sun's distance. If the navigator neglects to apply the sun's semi-diameter to his observation at sea, he is 16 nautical miles out in calculating the position his ship is in. A minute of arc on the sextant represents a nautical mile, and if the semi-diameter be 16 miles, The diameter is of course 32 miles, and as measured by the sextant, the sun's diameter is 32 minutes of arc, that is 32 nautical miles in diameter. Let him disprove this who can. If ever disproof is attempted, it will be a literary curiosity well worth framing. Measuring with sextants and calculating with plane trigonometry, both the sun and moon figure to be only about 32 miles in diameter and approximately 3,000 miles away. The moon is actually a semi-transparent luminary and not the solid spherical desert planet that NASA would have us believe. In fact, it is likely that both the sun and moon are not densely physical at all and are simply luminous flat disks able to pass by or through one another during eclipses. E. Eschini said, "The results of recent research prove that the heavenly luminaries are not worlds, but lights, and should cause all men who have been led to accept as proven Copernicus's theory of the motions of the Earth to reconsider this subject." Gabrielle Henriette said, "The satellites of the Earth are not masses of matter. They are luminous and transparent disks without substance. The moon, in particular, conveys the impression of being an ethereal manifestation, and the uncertain and elusive character which is usually associated with this satellite results precisely from its immaterial nature. It was recognized from the earliest times that the satellites of the Earth, particularly the sun and the moon, were not solid, opaque bodies. They were first, until Aristotle, considered to be souls or spirits, which does not imply a physical nature. To the ancients, they were simply lights, and they gave the sun and the moon a very apt name. They called them luminaries. In the flat Earth model, the sun and moon luminaries revolve around the Earth once every 24 hours for the sun, and approximately 25 hours for the moon, illuminating like spotlights the areas over which they pass. The sun's annual journey from tropic to tropic, solstice to solstice, is what determines the length and character of days, nights, and seasons. This is why equatorial regions experience almost year-round summer and heat, while higher latitudes north and especially south experience more distinct seasons with harsh winters. The heliocentric model claims seasons change based on the ball Earth's alleged axial tilt and elliptical orbit around the sun. Their flawed current model even places us closest to the sun, 91,400,000 miles, in January, when it is actually winter, and farthest from the sun, 94,500,000 miles, in July, when it's actually summer throughout much of the Earth. They say due to the ball Earth's tilt, different places receive different amounts of direct sunlight, and that is what produces the seasonal and temperature changes. This makes little sense, however, because if the sun's heat travels over 90 million miles to reach the ball Earth, how could a slight tilt, a mere few thousand miles maximum, negate the sun's 90 million mile journey, giving us simultaneous tropical summers and Antarctic winters? Thomas Winship said, "The Earth is a stretched out structure which diverges from the central north in all directions towards the south. The equator, being midway between the north center and the southern circumference, divides the course of the sun into north and south declination. The longest circle around the world, which the sun makes, is when it has reached its greatest southern declination. Gradually going northwards, the circle is contracted. In about 3 months after the southern extremity of its path has been reached, the sun makes a circle around the equator. Still pursuing a northerly course as it goes round and above the world, in another 3 months, the greatest northern declination is reached, when the sun again begins to go towards the south. In north latitudes, when the sun is going north, it rises earlier each day, is higher at noon, and sets later, while in southern latitudes at the same time, the sun, as a matter of course, rises later, reaches a lesser altitude at noon, and sets earlier. In northern latitudes, during the southern summer, say from September to December, the sun rises later each day, is lower at noon, and sets earlier, while in the south, he rises earlier, reaches a higher altitude at noon, and sets later each day. This movement round the Earth daily is the cause of the alternations of day and night, while his northerly and southerly courses produce the seasons. When the sun is south of the equator, it is summer in the south and winter in the north, and vice versa. The fact of the alternation of the seasons flatly contradicts the Newtonian delusion that the Earth revolves in an orbit around the Sun. It is said that summer is caused by the Earth being nearest the Sun, and winter by its being farthest from the Sun. But if the reader will follow the argument in any textbook, he will see that according to the theory, when the Earth is nearest the Sun, there must be summer in both northern and southern latitudes, and in like manner, when it is farthest from the Sun, it must be winter all over the Earth at the same time, because the whole of the globe Earth would then be farthest from the Sun. In short, it is impossible to account for the recurrence of seasons on the assumption that the Earth is globular and that it revolves in an orbit around the Sun. Gabrielle Henriette said, "The essential feature of the year is its division into 2 equal periods of 6 months, based first on the predominating length of the days over that of the nights, and vice versa, conditions which are governed by the varying hours of sunrise and sunset, and secondly, by the either high or low height reached by the sun in the heavens at midday. The first cycle, during which the days are longer than the nights, and the sun reaches its culminating point of the year, extends from the spring equinox to the autumn equinox, i.e. March 21st to September 22nd, and the second cycle, during which, inversely, the duration of the nights exceeds that of the days, and the sun descends to its lowest point of the year, extends from the autumn equinox to the spring equinox, i.e. September 23rd to March 20th. These 2 6-month periods are also characterized by an opposition of temperature. During the first cycle, which corresponds to spring and summer, the heat gradually rises and falls, while during the second cycle, which comprises autumn and winter, it is the intensity of the cold which progressively increases and decreases. In the flat Earth model, the sun and moon spotlights are perpetually hovering over and parallel to the surface of the Earth. From our vantage point, due to the law of perspective, the day and night luminaries appear to rise up the eastern horizon, curve peaking high overhead, and then sink below the western horizon. They do not escape to the underside of the flat Earth, as one might imagine, but rather rotate concentric clockwise circles around the circumference from tropic to tropic. The appearance of rising, peaking, and setting is due to the common law of perspective, where tall objects appear high overhead when nearby, but at a distance gradually lower towards the vanishing point. Samuel Rowbotham said, "Although the sun is at all times above and parallel to the Earth's surface, he appears to ascend the firmament from morning until noon, and to descend and sink below the horizon at evening. This arises from a simple and everywhere visible law of perspective. A flock of birds, when passing over a flat or marshy country, always appears to descend as it recedes, and if the flock is extensive, the first bird appears lower or nearer to the horizon than the last. The farthest light in a row of lamps appears the lowest, although each one has the same altitude. Bearing these phenomena in mind, it will easily be seen how the sun, although always parallel to the surface of the Earth, must appear to ascend when approaching and descend after leaving the meridian or noonday position. What can be more common than the observation that, standing at one end of a long row of lampposts, those nearest to us seem to be the highest, and those farthest away the lowest, whilst, as we move along towards the opposite end of the series, those which we approach seem to get higher, and those we are leaving behind appear to gradually become lower. It is an ordinary effect of perspective for an object to appear lower and lower as the observer goes farther and farther away from it. Let anyone try the experiment of looking at a lighthouse, church spire, monument, gas lamp, or other elevated object from a distance of only a few yards, and notice the angle at which it is observed. On going farther away, the angle under which it is seen will diminish, and the object will appear lower and lower as the distance of the observer increases, until, at a certain point, the line of sight to the object and the apparently uprising surface of the Earth upon or over which it stands will converge to the angle which constitutes the vanishing point or the horizon, beyond which it will be invisible. Heliocentrists would have you believe the very opposite of what every human who has ever walked the Earth has seen with their own eyes. It is obvious to any child and sovereign-minded adult that the sun, moon, stars, and planets, every light in the sky above, revolves around the motionless earth beneath our feet. It is also plain to see that the sun and moon are both approximately the same size and situated relatively close to Earth, not 400 times divergent and millions upon millions of miles away. To abandon your senses and everyday experience in favor of such unfounded science fiction fantasies is a fallacy of appeal to authority so extreme that it leaves the brainwashed believer impotent to trust his own natural instincts and forever thereafter chained to the fantastical explanations of astronomical charlatans. Thomas Winship said, "No one ever yet felt or saw the Earth careening through space at the terrific rates it is credited with. But everyone who is not blind can see the sun move. But the matter can be tested. It may be known for certain whether the sun moves or not. Take a school globe and place a style on the semicircle that holds it in position. Cause the globe to rotate against a lamp on a table, and you will find that the shadow left on the globe is always parallel to the equator, at whatever angle you may incline the globe. Further, let the style be of sufficient length to allow the shadow to fall on a flat surface, moving the globe towards the lamp, and the shadow will be a straight line. If therefore the shadow left on the earth by the sun be a straight line, then undoubtedly the sun is stationary. Drive a stake into the ground in such a position as to expose it to the sun for the greater part of a day, the whole day if possible. Mark the end of the shadow every quarter of an hour, and you will find that the marks form part of an elongated curve, clearly proving that the sun moves over a stationary earth." And David Wardlaw Scott said, "The path of the sun is concentric, expanding and contracting daily for 6 months alternately. This is easily proved by fixing a rod, say at noon on the 21st of December, so that on looking along it, the line of vision will touch the lower edge of the sun. This line of sight will continue for several days pretty much the same, but on the 9th or 10th day, it will be found that the rod will have to be moved considerably toward the zenith in order to touch the lower edge of the sun, and every day afterwards it will have to be raised till the 22nd of June. Then there will be a little change for a few days, as before, but day by day afterward, the rod will have to be lowered till the 21st of December, when the sun is farthest from the northern center and it is dark there. This expansion and contraction of the sun's path continues every year and is termed the northern and southern declination, and should demonstrate to modern astronomers the absurdity of calling the world a planet, as it remains stationary while the sun continues circling round the heavens." During Arctic summer, from approximately the 22nd to the 25th of June, at a high enough latitude and altitude, you can watch a phenomenon known as the midnight sun, where the sun stays continuously visible in the sky for 3 days straight. The midnight sun rises on the 22nd, and for the next 72 hours never disappears from sight, slowly ascending and descending every 12 hours, showing 3 brilliant sunsets and sunrises without ever actually setting below the horizon. In the Brighton Examiner of July 1870, United States Ambassador to Norway Mr. Campbell described his experience witnessing the midnight sun with a group of gentlemen on a cliff 1,000 feet above the Arctic Sea at the 69th north parallel. It was late but still sunlight. The Arctic Ocean stretched away in silent vastness at our feet. The sound of the waves scarcely reached our airy lookout. Away in the north, the huge old sun swung low along the horizon, like the slow beat of the tall clock in our grandfather's parlor corner. We all stood silently, looking at our watches. When both hands stood together at 12 midnight, the full round orb hung triumphantly above the waves. A bridge of gold running due north spangled the water between us and him. There he shone in silent majesty, which knew no setting. We involuntarily took off our hats. No word was said. Combine the most brilliant sunrise you ever saw, and its beauties will pall before the gorgeous coloring which lit up the ocean, heaven, and mountains. In half an hour, the sun had swung up perceptibly on its beat. The colors had changed to those of morning. A fresh breeze had rippled over the florid sea. One songster after another piped out of the ground behind us. We had slid into another day. From The Land of the Midnight Sun. Tourists from Haparanda prefer going to Ayasaxa, a hill 680 feet above the sea, from which, through 8 or 10 miles south of the Arctic Circle, they can see the midnight sun for 3 days. As the voyage drew to a close and we approached the upper end of the Gulf of Bothnia, the twilight had disappeared, and between the setting and rising of the sun hardly 1 hour elapsed. Haparanda is in 65 degrees 31 minutes north latitude and 41 miles south of the Arctic Circle. It is 1 degree 18 minutes farther north than Archangel and in the same latitude as the most northern part of Iceland. The sun rises on the 21st of June at 12:01 a.m. and sets at 11:37 p.m. From the 22nd to the 25th of June, the traveler may enjoy the sight of the midnight sun from Avasaxa, a hill 680 feet high and about 45 miles distant. If the Earth were actually a spinning globe revolving around the sun, the only place such a phenomena as the midnight sun could be observed would be at the poles. Any other vantage point from 89 degrees latitude downwards could never, regardless of any tilt or inclination, see the sun for 24 hours straight. To see the sun for an entire revolution on a spinning globe at a point other than the poles, you would have to be looking through miles and miles of land and sea for part of the revolution. Anyone below the 89th parallel could never witness the sun for 72 hours, 3 whole revolutions, straight, because to do so would be to assume you are somehow seeing through the globe and to the sun on the other side. Since such an assumption is ridiculous, and yet the midnight sun can clearly be seen as low as the 65th parallel, this is another absolute proof that the Earth is the flat, stationary center of the universe. Thomas Winship wrote, "If the Earth be a globe, at midnight the eye would have to penetrate thousands of miles of land and water, even at 65 degrees north latitude, in order to see the sun at midnight. That the sun can be seen for days together in the far north during the northern summer proves that there is something very seriously wrong with the globular hypothesis. Besides this, how is it that the midnight sun is never seen in the south during the southern summer? Cook penetrated as far south as 71 degrees, Weddell in 1893 reached as far as 74 degrees, and Sir James C. Ross in 1841 and 1842 reached the 78th parallel. But I am not aware that any of these navigators have left it on record that the sun was seen at midnight in the south." Heliocentrists also cannot explain why the midnight sun phenomena is not experienced anywhere in the southern hemisphere at any time of year. Quite to the contrary, it has been recorded by the Royal Belgian Geographical Society in Expedition Antarctique Belge that during the most severe part of the Antarctic winter, from 71 degrees south latitude onwards, the sun sets on May 17th and is not seen above the horizon again until July 21st. This is completely at odds with the ball Earth theory, but easily explained by the flat Earth model. The midnight sun is seen from high altitudes in extreme northern latitudes during Arctic summer because the sun, at its innermost cycle, is circling tightly enough around the polar center that it remains visible above the horizon for someone at such a vantage point. Likewise, in extreme southern latitudes, during Arctic summer, the sun completely disappears from view for over 2 months because there, at the northern tropic, at the innermost arc of its boomerang journey, the sun is circling the northern center too tightly to be seen from the southern circumference. Sammy Robotham wrote, "It is evident that in the great encircling oceans of the south, and the numerous islands and parts of continents which exist beyond that part of the earth where the sun is vertical, cannot have their days and nights, seasons, etc., precisely like those in the northern region. The north is a center, and the south is that center radiated or thrown out to a vast oceanic circumference, terminating in circular walls of ice, which form an impenetrable frozen barrier. Hence, the phenomena referred to as existing in the north must be considerably modified in the south. For instance, the north being central, the light of the sun advancing and receding gives long periods of alternate light and darkness at the actual center, but in the far south, the sun, even when moving in its outer path, can only throw its light to a certain distance, beyond which there must be perpetual darkness. No evidence exists of there being long periods of light and darkness regularly alternating as in the north. In the north, in summertime, when the sun is moving in its inner path, the light shines continually for months together over the central region and rapidly develops numerous forms of animal and vegetable life. In typical reverse-engineered damage control fashion, trying to explain away the midnight sun, problematic Arctic and Antarctic phenomena, and the fact that Polaris can be seen to 23.5 degrees south of the equator, desperate heliocentrists in the late 19th century again modified their theory to say the ball Earth actually tilts back 25.5 degrees on its vertical axis, thus explaining away many problems in one swoop. If it simply tilted the same direction constantly, however, this would still not explain the phenomena, because after 6 months of supposed orbital motion around the Sun, any amount of tilt would be perfectly opposite, thus negating their alleged explanation for Arctic and Antarctic irregularities. To account for this, heliocentrists then added that the Earth also wobbles in a complex combination of patterns known as planetary nutation, the Chandler wobble, and axial precession, which, in their vivid imaginations, somehow explains away common sense. Common sense, however, says that if the heat of the Sun travels 93 million miles to reach us, a small axial tilt and wobble, the difference of a few thousand miles, should be completely negligible. If the ball Earth actually spun around 93 million miles from the Sun, regardless of any tilt or wobble, temperature and climate the whole world over should be almost completely uniform. If the heat of the Sun truly traveled 93 million miles to reach the Earth's equator, the extra few thousand miles to the poles, regardless of any supposed tilt or wobble, no matter how extreme, would surely be negligible in negating such intense heat. E. Eschini wrote, "The supposition that the seasons are caused by the Earth's annual motion round the Sun at a mean distance of 93 million miles is grotesque. According to Piazzi, the size of the Sun is in proportion to the Earth as 329,360 to 1. The diameter exceeds that of the Earth 112 times. The Earth appears, as Biot says by this statement, a mere grain of sand as compared to the Sun. This enormous expanse of light, focused on a rotating grain of sand, at the distance of 93 millions of miles, would cause the same season throughout it. The paltry few miles in comparison that separates London from Cape Town could never cause diverse seasons, neither would the distance from London to the Riviera justify the difference in the climate that characterizes the two places. Common sense also says if the Earth were actually a ball spinning daily with uniform speed around the Sun, there should be exactly 12-hour days and 12-hour nights everywhere, all year round, regardless of any alleged tilt or inclination. Half the sphere would always be lit, and the other half not. The great variety and length of days and nights throughout the year all over Earth testifies to the fact we do not live on a spinning ball planet. There cannot exist phenomena such as this on a globe, nor the midnight sun, nor anything like Antarctic winter, where the sun is nowhere to be found for over 2 months per year. When light of any kind shines through a dense medium, it appears larger, or rather gives a greater glare, at a given distance than when it is seen through a lighter medium. This is more remarkable when the medium holds aqueous particles or vapor in solution, as in a damp or foggy atmosphere. You can see this by standing within a few yards of a street lamp and noticing the size of the light. On going away to many times the distance, the light upon the atmosphere will appear considerably larger. This phenomenon may be noticed to a greater or lesser degree at all times, but when the air is moist and vapory, it is more intense. It is evident that at sunrise and at sunset, the sun's light must shine through a greater length of atmospheric air than at midday, besides which the air near the Earth is both more dense and holds more watery particles in solution than the higher strata through which the sun shines at noonday, and hence the light must be dilated or magnified as well as modified in color. So the sun, as it sets towards the horizon, from a viewer's perspective on Earth, simultaneously gets bigger due to the reason given above, and smaller due to the law of perspective. The net result is what you see. Notice how the distant lights have a brighter and bigger glare, even though they're further away. Many contributing factors, including wavelength, diffraction, air pressure, air temperature, width of aperture, altitude, humidity, and clarity all contribute to the net result. The amount to which the sun and moon will be magnified due to the above reasons, and shrink due to the law of perspective, will depend on all of the above. eNature.com writes, "The moon's warm color when seen at lower angles is caused by the relatively larger amount of atmosphere through which one is observing it as compared to when the moon is right overhead. This additional atmosphere scatters the bluish component of the light of the moon, making the low-lying moon appear redder to the observer's eyes. If you look later when the moon is higher above the horizon, you'll see it appears much whiter than earlier in the evening." It does change, and the changes are mostly due to the atmosphere. So I can show you a picture of the sun setting in the desert where it's very dry, and you'll see the sun shrink and shrink into a tiny, tiny pinprick before it disappears into the horizon. And then I can show you another video of on a more over the ocean, say, on a more humid day, the sun is going to actually expand a little bit due to the atmosphere and then disappear into the horizon like a big ball, as many people have seen it. But either way that it disappears, whether it disappears into a pinprick before leaving the horizon or it expands and goes down the horizon, it's simply moving away from your perspective, as we talked about. It's not actually going down, just like a row of street lamps aren't getting shorter and shorter as they get farther and farther away from you. It's just an element of perspective.